retreads. Maybe they might be shuffling from one club to the other club. And I don't think Green's going to be back with anybody, actually. Kapler is an outfielder, if I'm not mistaken, so he doesn't know pitching, so he's out of luck. Let me see. So, I don't know. A lot of things.
Now, Mark, on that idea of the managerial vacancies, I mean, I've heard about Madden linked to the Angels for a while, and I would love to see Mike Trout playing under him because of, obviously, Madden's pedigree at turning teams around. But we've seen that with guys like Showalter, too, who, in my opinion, could be the best option for the Mets. But what do you hear about this idea of him possibly being a candidate for the Phillies job? He is a Pennsylvania native. I believe he grew up pretty close to where Citizens Bank Park currently is. I mean, could you imagine Bryce Harper playing under him and maybe he learned something from him?
Well, yeah, but, Machado, was talking to him about, look at Buck Showalter for the Padres job. And, he sure does talk like a redneck because I know Buck a little bit. And my brother, he went to Mississippi State. I do know that. And so he got a little redneck blood running in him. Showalter, anyway.
Yeah. No, Showalter I've heard linked to the Padres as well. That's interesting, though. But, do you think the hiring of Madden would have drastic implications on how, game decisions were run with the Angels moving forward? Because we've heard about Brad Ausmus even, understand he's an Ivy League grad. I believe he went to Yale, if I'm not mistaken, or Duke. I'm not.
Well, yeah, he's too smart, see?
Absolutely, and I've always found him a little strange how he at some points embraced analytics and he wasn't too keen on them. But how would you see Madden's play style, managing style altering the way that the Angels play? Because we've seen earlier this year they did implement the opener, which the Reyes have been using, and in fact they've actually brought Blake Snell out of the bullpen to pitch in this game after Glasnow threw a little bit more than 3 innings. But could you see Madden really having a drastic effect on that Angels team, a team that's only been to the playoffs once since Mike Trout has been a player on that roster?
Yeah, because Madden just is just a plain old guy. He just let's play baseball. He's not somebody that's worrying about another. Okay, we have to do this or we have to do this. I mean, anytime you say we have to do something, you're setting yourself up to fail. He just says let's go out and get them and let the players play. That's what a lot of managers don't do sometimes. I know I played for Whitey. I bring Whitey up because I was lucky, and he's a Hall of Fame manager. Not that means anything, but there's some people that should be in the Hall of Fame and some shouldn't. If you know the people. But the funny thing is with Whitey, he just let you play. He just let you play out there. If you didn't play, or if and you always hustled around Whitey. If you were below grade, he'd probably trade you or send you out somewhere. So, that's the whole deal. Bust your butt all the time. And, Madden expects the same thing.
Absolutely.
That's the thing about Madden. Everybody says, well, he didn't do his job. Well, actually, it was the players that didn't do their job. It wasn't Madden. He didn't have the right players at the right time for the run of the last 6 weeks, and it fell apart, and that's just the way it was.
Oh, I totally agree. Considering the fact that, I really, even at the outset of this season, I'm not sure if you concur with me, but their starting rotation was a lot older. John Lester, given his playoff heroic, Scott, we know what he did with the Red Sox and the Cubs coming out of the bullpen in Game 7.
Right.
And giving him that length. But, he's getting older. He didn't have a great year this year. Jose Quintana's older. He had a very up-and-down year this year. Darvish showed flashes near the end of the season, arguably those last 20 starts, where he kind of simplified things. We saw the same pitcher who was, would you probably like, Mark, big fireballer from the right side, although, he's an anomaly for a Japanese pitcher, throws so hard, but he's got a bevy of pitches, a very American delivery for a pitcher from Japan. We saw him show flashes again, but then at the same time, you can't necessarily blame everything on Madden when that team he was running out there wasn't put together by him.
Well, the other factor is that, it's all according to how you use your pitchers. Darvish, they got the year before, and he was basically shot coming into the Cubs, and so they had to, basically rest him for, 3/4 of the first season before he actually started throwing a little bit better. And he got some rest, but that's exactly, if you saw Darvish pitch in the playoffs, you thought he was like a little leaguer. He was well below bat speed. So, That's why he probably got a few outs. And then they finally said, hey, this guy hadn't got it tonight. His arm sucks. It's shot.
So, Mark, my question to you is this, okay? And I know it depends on every situation, but what do you think, at what point, for a manager, that you need a new voice? Every 5 or 6 years where the message gets a little stale?
Well, you're probably close, right there. I mean, of course, Lasorda was a one-year contract guy for a long time. So was Walter Austin.
Right.
But that was back in the different era. And It was a different day. Now you've got to hold these guys' attention. You got to jump through hoops and, turn somersaults and everything else. And yet be calm and bite your tongue, or those players will get you fired.
Right.
So, it's you walk into a clubhouse and they're still playing Xbox back in the back room back there in their television room. So you get on somebody about playing Xbox, I'm sure they're gonna be a little bit hot, but don't let it offend them so much.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So, all right, so let's look at some of these managerial openings that you have. I know that Mike Scioscia is a name that people have talked about going probably down to the Padres. I think that would be an interesting thing. I know Buck Showalter is a name that's been brought up in a few places. Kapler gets fired because the Phillies owner wanted really an experienced guy. And I'm not going to sit here and try to pick who's going to go, but we have 8 openings. Do the best you can to think with some of these what guys might be the right fit to the best of your ability.
Well, I've already mentioned too that I felt, but Scioscia was with the Angels and he didn't do anything for any amount of time over there.
Right.
Nothing. And he's a great guy. He's a really good baseball man. But you know what? I don't think he talks the lingo with this crowd today.
No,
okay.
Mark, I totally agree with you. I mean, there's been a lot of scouts who, you expect scouts to just kind of like analyze players, but a lot of people have said about Scioscia, the general notion surrounding him is he hasn't adapted with the analytics and that he hasn't been willing to work with the front office on game plans, and that, Scott and Mark, has been part of his downfall.
I just think he doesn't. I don't think he talks the lingo with the players, though. And the players actually they get a good read on this. It's that's the ones that are between the lines out there.
Right.
Your analytics is okay. It's okay, but are you going to tell me that you're going to tell that to the pitcher on the Cardinals, Martinez, about analytics? Are you kidding me? He can't even come close to spelling his own language. It ain't gonna happen. And if you look at the dog, here's the funny thing that some ownership or some general managers or some farm directors maybe don't understand that have never pitched. But if you sit there, and I've said this many times, watch where the catcher sets up, watch where the ball ends up. It doesn't always end up where they set up.
Right.
So don't tell me, because I know many times I was outside the zone and the hitter would swing at it, and my pitching coach would say, like I did, was the same way. He said, nice pitch, is that really where you wanted it? And we'd both laugh as I'd come off the mound, into the dugout. So, come on, gentlemen. Get with it, wake up, watch the strike zone. Sure, the ball follows it all the way in, on those little analytic things through the strike zone plate. But look where the ball goes and look where the hitter swings. If the hitter gets himself out, the pitcher doesn't really get him out so much. It's the hitter that gets himself out.
That's true. So do you want to take any other educated guesses at all about certain...
Well, let me see who you got. Mets, I don't even know. I don't think Girardi's going to go there.
Okay.
I think Girardi's going to end up. He's a Peoria, Illinois boy, and I think he's going to in Northwestern. I think he's going to end up with the Cubs.
I thought that too. Okay, go ahead.
It's kind of a no-brainer. But I don't know who they've got in the mix. And you got Kapler over there. You got all these other guys getting fired. Has Dave Roberts been fired yet? We don't know that yet. But anyway, I'm just saying. So you got these guys, but it's kind of like there's so much to pick from out there anymore.
Right.
That it's a wild. It's called a wag in my situation. That's called a wild ass guess, actually.
I like that. That was good, Mark.
That's exactly what this whole thing's about, is people can throw all these names out, and then, well, do they have somebody in the system? Probably not, but they want experience. Everybody looks for experience, and they said, well, what about Bochy? Is he down? Yeah, Bochy's probably down, but he's heard he might, pick up the Padres down there because he's going back to, that's where he lives, he and Kim. That's where they live, out in San Diego. I wouldn't see, just because he said he wasn't going to manage anymore doesn't mean that, because I know Boch.
And it's interesting. I'm sorry, Mark, what were you saying?
Well, I was with Boch for a year, and so I know him pretty well. I was his pitching coach in High Desert and in High A ball in the California League, so I know him pretty well.
And it's funny though that when he's actually been asked by a couple reporters if he's wanted to manage again, and he's really hasn't totally ruled it out, given with his body language, and I think he's a baseball lifer, and that's what a lot of these guys are. Buck Showalter, Jim Leyland, Scott, they never played in the major leagues. Bruce Bochy was a catcher on the '84 Padres, a team that went to the World Series and lost to your Detroit Tigers, team highlighted by Willie Hernandez and Jack Morris.
All right, look at this guy, Mark. He's on a roll, man. We got him rolling, don't we, buddy?
But
well. Here's the other thing is Boch has heart issues, like me. And so I think Kim's told him, he said, you need to stay down for a while, then come back. Maybe, who knows? But I'm just saying he could. He's hard-headed. He likes that. He likes to be on that baseball field. There's no doubt about it. But there's a lot of baseball people out there, and, a lot of people getting interviewed for these jobs. And, some of these young pups are that can relate to some of the younger and older guys. The teams that win, it seems like to me, are the ones that have a good mix of young and old. And the chemistry is right there. If you have all old guys, it's not going to work. I've seen that, And then it's like the Yankees used to in the late '70s when they had all those money teams right there when they first really started going in for those money teams. That didn't work either. So they got burned a whole lot, and it just never seemed to work. And then you've got the young teams on the rebuild, like Atlanta. Well, they're short about a pitcher or two right now, but if they get a pitcher or two, maybe they would have beat the Cardinals. Who knows?
And Mark, and that's interesting. The Braves actually have a relatively big pockets to spend. I mean, we've seen them spend before. They gave Acuna $8 for $100 million, Albies $7 for $35. They spent on B.J. Upton, now Melvin Upton Jr. in the offseason before the 2013 season. That never worked out. But could you see them, and you said they're a pitcher or two short, could you see them going after a guy like Garrett Cole? We've heard him linked to the Angels, and, obviously the guy was terrific this year. Scott, I'm not sure if you're aware, 326 strikeouts this year, the most since Kurt Schilling in 2002, 313.
Very well aware, Lewis. Okay, I follow this game too. Maybe not like you from a statistical standpoint, but I follow it. Yes,
but
I am aware.
Could you see the Braves actually making an attempt at a guy like Cole, who's projected to get between $220, $250 million for, say, 6 or 7 years?
Yeah, I could because, but here's the other side. Is what's their big punchline, their big sales job? To Cole is he's going to say, well, okay, the money's fine, but where are you going? For the series, we've got some young guys here. You just saw us compete in the playoffs. We need you out there, and then we will compete. And that's their sales pitch right there.
Yeah, so, I think the one thing that tends to get lost in all of this, though, I think the owners are getting smarter that they don't want pitchers for more than 5 or 6 years anyways, because the back end of those contracts are really not very good.
David about Price, 3 years maybe.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, Mark. I mean, David Price is a classic example of that. Mm-hmm. So, all right, so you know what? We'll get off the managerial thing because I know Lewis is really chomping at the bit for this one. So we're going to go ahead and put you on the spot, okay? Do the Dodgers keep Dave Roberts?
Well, he's a company man. He's a Dodger type of guy. But you have really no control over him throwing a baseball for some of the best pitchers supposedly that the Dodgers do always have. And the Dodgers is basically a pitching organization.
Right.
Always has been, always will be.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is I know when I go on my Facebook, and I have many different clubs that I go after and read, And the fans always talk a lot about the hitters, and when they should be talking